Siete por heno, enemigo to por heshle to por disagree. Hi everyone, I am Tara. Oh. I really like this. Hi everyone, I am Tara, aka Spirit Mother, and I would like to welcome you all back to my channel on YouTube, Spirit Teaches It Going With Yourself, on TikTok 1974 Enlightened Soul, and I'm also live on my Facebook. If you're new to my channel, I always recommend suggesting that you encourage you to read the description on my YouTube channel to get a better understanding of what it is that I do bring forward. Okay, just now I seemed like it was like a glitch because my TikTok camera it just flashed. Okay, so some of you are aware that I bring a lot of different stuff to my channel, and there's been a lot of back and forth of fighting over like white culture, black culture, Indian culture, in the land. This is going to irritate quite a few people. Okay, no, I'm being honest right now. It's going to irritate people because a lot of the time, the reason why it irritates you is maybe you did not look into history. Okay, I'm not talking about what you learned in school. Okay, I'm talking about what you learned by looking into your own genealogy, looking into the perceived past beyond the veil. Okay, instead of just focusing on one basic part of it. Okay, because right now, especially in the United States and Canada, okay, we're fighting over the land with regards to the Indigenous community. Okay, and about the truth and reconciliation with regards to children on the residential schools and what have you. But see, what you did know, like it's always said that it was just the Indian children that were on residential schools. But if anybody knows actual history, it wasn't just the Indian children. It was all children who could not speak English. Okay, so I looked into the first culture with regards to English. I looked into the first beginning to colonization because you all say and blame it on the white man. Okay. Oh, this is good. Yeah, when I said that, like even like okay, even with the black culture, okay, you're fighting over color, okay, and you're fighting over who was here first. It's like the chicken or the egg. Okay. Now, people say, yeah, well, yourself, because, hey, I'm bringing it forward because I watched the video the other day and I even posted on here with regards to an older lady back years ago. She was saying that, blaming it on white culture because the black men are going and saying that the white people are afraid of extinction and they're fighting because of that, and white people are taking the black men and leaving the black children fatherless and what have you. Now, I have to ask, how old are you people? How evolved are you people? Okay. People are constantly every year, truth and reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. What do you class truth and reconciliation? Just the residential schools? That's just truth and reconciliation? Did you know that before the European settlers came over, they had residential schools for them? Okay. But see, I'm not like, you know, I'm not picking sides because I have native blood, I have European blood, I have British blood, I even have okay, this here in my hand, all this is the lists of people that came over. And starting in 1749, which, if you read that, Cornwallis is shipped to Halifax. These are the names that come over with Cornwallis. Okay, right from A to Z. Okay? So Edward Cornwallis come over first, but we're just gonna hold off for a minute because people are getting irritated with that because I can feel it. And it's like, somebody already wants to pull my tongue out. But like I said yesterday, Spirit says, pull my tongue out, I'll just grow another one. Okay. Now, okay. So let's start off because this is all a war over like colonization. Okay. The stealing of land and colonization. Okay. So what do you think of it? I asked Google with regards to when did the first colonization like the civilization of colonization first come? Okay. Now, bear with me, I have it here. Keep it away. Okay, and on top of that, I also have the book, The Loyalist of New Brunswick. Okay, but that gives you an idea. Okay, because the Loyalist came in the 1800s, was it not? Because I also have. So this here, I got to show there. This is the genealogy of my great great grandparents on my father's side, and possibly is on my father's grandfather, on my father's father's side, and on my father's mother's side. Okay, I didn't get into that because the mother's, okay, but I do know that where it actually came from. Okay, right in here. Okay, and he came. They would have came and went to the States. Okay, and they come over, and then my other great granddaddy, on my dad's side, he come over in 1841. One of them come over in the 1700s, early mid 1700s, and the other one come over in the mid 1800s. Okay, they came over and they were the ones that were shipwrecked off the coast of Newfoundland and were taken to shelter. See, you're gonna fucking hate me for this. So, hey, so the fight was that, and the black culture. But how many of you knew that it was actually John A. MacDonald who had his troops go around and terrorize the black community to make them believe that was the other ones. They were British, right? So let's go in here because this is labeled history lesson or history and the blame game. I said my channel's not for everyone. It'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, I'll piss you off. You want to punch me upside my head, but I say, hey, keep focusing on yourself and bring it energetically. Because if it helps you get through every day, but just remember, what you do to me or what you put onto me will come back to you. Now, I would like to be able to have one of those things in the background. Okay, awesome. Okay, we got here history of colonization. I don't know. We're gonna improvise. I should have. I don't want to use my chalkboard. I can't see that. I'm not gonna light, so it's not gonna work that way. Forget. I was gonna do the board thing. And I feel like I should still do the board thing. Oh well. Okay. So I have here, I asked Google, which was the first civilization to colonize. And okay, it's saying something don't seem right there. When I asked the first ones to colonize, ancient Egypt is considered one of the earliest in trading settlements in southern Canaan around 3200 BC, with evidence including fortress and pottery. Other early colonization civilizations include the Phoenicians, Phoenicians, and that was 1550 BC, who established maritime trading posts across the Mediterranean. Okay, so we're fighting over the now from 1700. Okay, now it's saying there the first to colonize was the Egyptians. So I went and hey, I looked up because some people are saying that white man didn't show up until the 1600s. So if it was until white man didn't show up until the 1600s, how is it that the white man did the colonization? See, that's where you're looking at just your whatever, right? What you're taught. But you're not taught that the first colonization was actually the Egyptians, 3200 BC. That's before Christ, right? I'm going to get into things. Okay, this may take all day. I don't care. Pop in anytime. If the red light is on, if the circle is lit, I'm on, and I'm talking about the same thing. Okay, so it established a settlement, and then the Greeks was the 8th century BC, established city, colonization. Ancient Rome expanded colonization to solidify control. Okay, so Egyptians. So, hey, not to be rude, but I did Google what color were the Egyptians because, hey, you're fighting over color. I had a video yesterday, and I think I talked, and this young woman, she was saying about how when when they came here, we took their language from them. Did you even know that it was the Germanic first? Now we said we took their language from them too. Wait a minute. And people will be irritated and say, oh, well, they did beat it out of the Indians and what have you. Well, they tried doing that with the European settlers too, because it was the Germanic that went to Britain and brought about England. I have it here. Okay, so just hang on because this is the history lessons you don't get in school. Whether I'm a fucking history teacher or I got a diploma to teach or not, I do know how to fucking read. I do know how to understand and interpret things, and I do know how to look beyond it. So I don't care what color. The Egyptians were brown, so they were. Here it says, Egypt. Ancient Egyptians had a derived range of skin tones, primarily appearing light brown to dark brown, reflecting their North African, Mediterranean, and Near Eastern heritage. I don't want that, do you? So the first colonizers were actually brown tone. But you want to go after white skinned people who actually, you know, eventually came from brown skin because as you move away from the equator, you save up melatonin. Okay, see, the thing is, this woman, this African American older woman back years ago, it was very confusing, especially like even with that young woman. It's like, we did not take your language from you. How do you know, really know that, that was something passed through because the Native community, okay, the chiefs in the 1700s. Anybody know what that says? Right there, it says fact sheet on peace and friendship treaties in the Maritimes and Gaspé. Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1760. The treaty went from it. I didn't read it all yet, but hey, we'll go through it because I also have a part here where the Native community are saying about land, right? But yet in their culture, because who was it? Let's see. Because I even asked which chief was it that said about with regards to the land. Chief Settler, and this is from the archives. There's Captain John Smith. Captain John Smith, well, he was affiliated with, as far as I know, he was affiliated with Elk Island because I believe he was my sixth or seventh great Grammy's son because he was my sixth or great granddaddy's stepson, which my sixth or seventh great Grammy was Donald Trump's third, second or third great. Why am I bringing this forward? Because, hey, I'm putting the pieces of the puzzle together, something that people don't want to do. Exactly. No, we're going down a rabbit hole together. Something that people don't want to do. You can be in here or not. That's entirely up to yourself. I really don't give a crap. But I am going to get this out because I'm getting sick and tired of people saying about the white people when they always say about truth and reconciliation, but you don't want to take accountability, right? For the truth. Because, oh, right, you only go back to what they teach you. The rest of it, you got to do it on your own. The widely recognized quote, "How can we buy or sell the sky, the warmth of the land?" The idea is strange to us. It attributed to Chief Settler, a leader of the Smush and Dumash tribes in the Pacific Northwest. Famous speech report delivered in 1854 to Isaac Seed, governor of Washington Territory, in response to the U.S. government's offer to buy their land and place them on reserves. So it's not saying you own the land. It's saying they can't sell it, but you can't, like, really, there's no land to be taken nor conquered. When they're doing this, they're actually committing crimes against humanity because the land is for everyone to live on. You can be irritated with me on that. I don't care anymore. That's the Indian chief saying it. You can't own it. So if you can't own it, how are the indigenous community claiming it? The British can't claim it. They said that, they come in and they come in with guns and stuff, but yet your own chiefs were the ones that made the treaties. So if they they didn't take the conquered land and take it. Did a war start? Yes, in 1756. The Treaty of Paris, 1763. Oh, surprisingly, the 7 Years' War, okay? The 7 Years' War was fought from 1756 to 1763. Do any of you know what, the real possibility of what started that war? Probably not, right? Oh. Okay, here it says, my seventh grade granddaddy was one of the foreign Presbyterian settlers who were recruited in Europe to populate the province of Nova Scotia. Did you get recruited? Okay, because, I said, here's a list of all of Cornwallis's people that came in 1749. And the European settlers, oh, here it is, still here. I have right up here with regards to it and what have you. Oh, shit. Oh, okay. And then I have in here the European settlers that first started coming, and they didn't start coming until 1750, 51, and 52. So the word recruited, meaning of recruit. enlist in the armed forces. But they put them on George's Island. And you're familiar with George's Island? George's Island is surrounded by water in the middle of the harbor. What do they have in San Francisco? They have a prison, right? Well, it was like a prison to the ones that came over. The European settlers that were brought over, which were Swiss, German, Indian, many different people. You can really be irritated with me with regards to this. How many people are familiar with the military and how they treat the people? My seventh great granddaddy, and many of yours, was the one who petitioned for Edward Cornwallis to get everyone off the godforsaken island because they were dying. And the Acadians were giving them contaminated milk. They were. I had it. Like, that's how my two of my seventh great granddaddy's children died. So, hey, sit with it for a bit. You want truth and reconciliation, but like I said, you don't want to look at the truth of the hand that we all had in it. Because it wasn't just Indian kids in what you perceive to be the native community for here that we supposedly stole the land. But see, why won't you look at truth? Especially if it means that your culture, your skin color had a hand in it all too. You weren't innocent. Your leaders were not innocent. So that's about he was married. They come over on the speedboat in the 50s. He come over on the speedboat in 52. And then my great Grammys, that seventh great Grammys parents came over at the same time. But they got thrown overboard. And they were the grandparents of the ones that were hung regarding the Boutwell brothers trial in New Lunenburg. You've got a myth about that. You say that they killed those people. No, they didn't. Did you ever hear that Reba McEntire song? The judge got bloodstains in his hands because the guy that was killed, he happened to join the Indian Patrol a year after my seventh great granddaddy died, was scalped by Edward Cornwallis and his goon in front of his pregnant wife and 1.5-year-old child. See, when you look up about Edward Cornwallis and they say about the adult and the three youth, who the fuck do you think they were talking about? Do you not realize that that's what started the 7-Year War? But you wouldn't put that into context because you say, no, look, you're white. He was scalped in front of people, then drug away because he lived, and put in the prison on George's Island, and then skinned and tortured. Because how dare you stand up to the crown and say, get us off this island, right? Especially when you're considered a fucking peasant. I'm sharing what I've researched. So he died in 56. He was scalped in 56. And it just so happens that the 7 Years' War was fought from 1756 to 1763. Coincidence? And it started here, right? People will say, like even my certain ones in my family will say, well, I don't know why you look into that stuff. Because I can, and you should too. But some people just don't care what's happening in the world. But it's, I came here for a different purpose. I didn't come here to sit on my ass and just eat bonbons and sugar plums and all that stuff. I'm not being rude. I even have someone like, just because you're a history teacher, why are you looking down on me? Because you took years and years of school and I learned it in less than a year by researching it for myself and using my own discernment and not going by a book that's taught mainstream in school. So Frederick whatever, Eminem, however you pronounce his last name. He joined, like I said, my great granddaddy, my seventh great granddaddy, was scalped and drug away. And a year, not like that was 1756. This man that was supposed to have been killed by my cousins, my great Grammy's nephews, he joined the Indian Patrol, maybe not even a year later. You know, keep seeing that, when my great granddaddy petitioned, you chose him to be your leader. And he got you off the island. But he didn't take land. He was given a piece of land. It was lot 36. It was 30-acre lots. He was the first one to get a piece of land. According to this one, the first to get the land. And then Hank, Hank. This is my seventh great Grammy's genealogy on her side. This is my seventh great granddaddy's genealogy. And then I have like my McMullen side. Questa è un scelto. And these, let's see. Excuse the coffee. This here, it's all deeds. And they are my great seventh grade, sixth or seventh great granddaddy's deeds on my dad's side, the property that he owned on Oak Island, which he owned lot 9, Nolan's Cross. You know, I even looked into so I that aside. I even looked into, you know, some of the deeds on Oak Island. I even looked into deeds with regards to ones that knew my seventh great granddad. Okay. Well, sorry, it's my sixth great granddaddy's deeds. These are the deeds of Daniel McGinnis and Samuel Ball. These are the deeds of my sixth, seventh great granddaddy on my dad's side. And these are the deeds of my sixth great granddaddy. And I have Sean recently, he had allodial deeds. And I think he was Indian, so he was trying to protect the land. Okay, so, and I also have my great granddaddy's will, and I have my, this here would be my seventh grade Grammy's brother's will here. And I have my sixth great granddaddy's will, and I have Samuel Ball's will. And I have Anthony Vaughn's will, and his father before him. You're questioning, like, why are you, like, why? Because I've been digging into my own genealogy. That's why. And we'll get to this shortly. Okay, because right now what you're experiencing is it's going for another property book, right? Okay, you're blaming one half for that. Okay. Pobrecito in the morning. So, my seventh great granddaddies on both sides, their genealogies. Interesting. Colonialism is a phenomenon that has occurred throughout human history across the world. Colonies were established by many important ancient and medieval civilizations. So you're blaming white men. Such as the Phoenicians and Babylonians and Persians and the Greeks and Romans and Chinese and the Arabs, among others. The High Middle Ages saw a variety of European civilizations moving west, north, east, and south out of their continent. The Crusader states in the 11th amplified so colonial features simple to those of ancient colonies. Okay, so the Egyptians came from, say, like in that other thing, from Africa, right? So if that's the case, then wouldn't that mean that the Africans started colonization first? Because this woman said that only a minority of people are white and the majority are brown and black, right? But people won't get that. See, right here for let's go down with Chief Settle with regards to the land. The message in his speech, in the speech, Chief Settle expressed that land, air, and water belong to no one and thus cannot be bought or sold, he famously said. How many of you looked into that? Probably few, right? Especially if you're still fighting over white and native, or Caucasian and native, or white and Indians. You say about the cowboys and Indians. Well, hey, I'm going to say it. Look back in history. The Indian culture were originally scalping people, and Edward Cornwallis just took a page out of their book. He even paid Indians to go scalp them, to scalp their own people. They ride you have the depiction riding around on the horses. They got their sticks and they got their scalps hanging off the sticks, and they're waving it and they're saying, and they're doing the sound. Oh, excuse. I was going to do this, but people would take offense to that because I could do the noise. So, hey, when are you really going to stop, and sit for a minute? And am I laughing at the history? Well, a little bit right now because it's like sitting with it. To keep the truth and reconciliation thing going, they're profiting from it because they've never found anything yet, have they? One woman had said about the radar. Well, if you watch the thing, they can use the radar thing, but it's only going to show an anomaly. It's not going to show whether it's a body or human body there. But they've not dug up anything yet, have they? And, I'm not saying that things didn't happen. And I said that before, but it was happening to all the children. Look at what's going on in the world today. Those traffickers, they didn't choose color or anything like that. They just took, right? So every part of this earth is sacred to, it says, to my people. Well, I'm going to question that. It's sacred to your people. It's sacred to all people. So to say it's sacred to my people, that's trying to say, well, then I own the land. So then, I'm going to say, is that the part of squatters' rights? But nobody owns the land. Even if somebody owns the land, you go on and you squat, so you claim it for yourself, right? After so long. But when I looked into things, it was actually like you say Mi'kmaq or Micmac or what have you, but it was actually the Asians, and actually Nova Scotia, Africa, and Europe were all connected together originally. Go look into it. But see, people won't take the time to do that because you'll stand up and you'll say how bumhurt you have been, how your land has been stolen from you. It was Queen Elizabeth, the Queen's ancestors, and that was the British community, which was Germain and Germain. Here, here it is here. On June 21st, 1749, Cornel Edward Cornwallis arrived in Chebucto Harbor near Halifax, Nova Scotia, leading approximately 2,500 to 3,000 British soldiers to establish a new city. These settlers, often called the Cornwallis settlers, who founded or the founders of Halifax, were primarily from London, including disbanded soldiers, sailors, tradesmen, and merchants. So who did it? Why are you still saying the European settlers? See, that's the part of you're taught the wrong history. You've been taught through school that the European settlers were the ones that come in and stole the land, but it was actually Edward Cornwallis's people, 2,500 to 3,000 of them. And that was in 1949, before the European settlers even started coming over. Edward Cornwallis was appointed governor of Nova Scotia to establish British stronghold, which directly countered the French and Lunenburg. Lunenburg was the first place that people were settled. That was the first place. The first place that my seventh great granddaddy was established. Lot number 36, Lunenburg. This is the Montbéliard immigrants were put at St. George's Island for many weeks, worked on the fortress or the fortification, suffered from cold and exposure as the weather began to change. And it is probably there that my seventh great granddaddy's first wife died. He then married the daughter of a French speaking immigrant. She was about half his age. The family went to Lunenburg in 53, drew a lot of clear land, just one side. Okay. It's documented that the French Australians that came over made tunnels leading to, from, and around George's Island. Wow! Died that winter as a ship was docking in Halifax Harbor. She was buried. Oh, this is, and then it was saying about made tunnels and around George's Island. My great granddaddy's wife died in Halifax, was buried in Halifax. For almost a year, the settlers were kept on George's Island before being settled in Lunenburg. My seventh great granddaddy wrote a lengthy petition to the governor begging him to get us off this godforsaken island. Seventh great granddaddy was first granted land in what is now the town of Lunenburg, but traded his lot for one further down the coast, where he died. It says like 55 here, but in the other records, it's 56. Because I looked in the number. There is a story which says that he was scalped by Indians in his own backyard in view of his wife and children. Oh, that's bootlear. No. What the hell? Oh, because this is her mother. Because June George Bootlear, which would be my seventh grade grandma's son, came over on a Sally in May 52 with his wife, Sarah, and 7 children, says the children's name, leaving the children to fend, okay, died while making the trans-Arctic trip, leaving the 7 children to fend for themselves. My seventh great granddaddy married his daughter in 53. Okay. So, I'm saying it's your seventh great granddaddy too. Maybe your sixth or your fifth, depending on how old you are. But even some of the family on my father's side, they they came from the Scots Ireland. Going back with regards to this, to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but some people just don't care, right? Because you only care because the mainstream is about keeping Indians and white people and black people, all of color, feuding with one another, or of different cultures feuding with one another, when they're all barbaric. There was Scottish slaves, even of the black culture, African American or African culture. They were enslaving their own people. When the European settlers came here, Edward Cornwallis had already done what he was going to do. They were just brought as Freemasons, builders, shipbuilders, bricklayers. You know, they were the ones that built the city. You know, the Tartarian. Oh, goddamn fucker. Seriously, look around you. If you think, like, as like with regards to the way things are built now, you actually like you build boxes. They were shipbuilders. They were they were full blown holders in a sense. The jacks of all trades. They had their trade, but they were the builders. They were not the ones who come in and colonized you. They were the ones that built things. And you know, like even people will say, "Oh, well, you brought us alcohol, and you made us alcoholics." They didn't make you an alcoholic. You made yourself an alcoholic by fucking drinking it. Because you say that all the stress. Well, you know, white people are alcoholics too. Who do we blame? Who can we blame for that? You know, some of them are some of them are hooked on different drugs and stuff like that. Who do we blame for that? You know, you brought us opium and all that shit, right? Definitely on which side. Seriously, like shit, tú estamos contra absolutely, but you'll sit around and you'll be butthurt. I'm not saying get over it. I'm saying sort the shit out. Read your shit. Don't go by what you learn in the fucking classroom because it ain't telling you anything. It's only going to tell you what's keeping fighting with one another. And because, you know, hey, your chiefs and the like the chief governments of the natives and the governments of, you know, what you class as white people. Like shit. How fucking old are you people by now? See this? Siege of Bianca. See this? That's my family's last name. See? It's a Dutch war. When French forces nominated and led by Louis, the whatever number of France, invaded the Frisian Command, then part of the Spanish Empire. War of Devotion. France captured most of the Spanish Netherlands. You know, it says like in another paragraph in another thing here. Where are you, Greg? Okay, this is my seventh great granddaddy. He married a German speaking Swiss. Well, the father was a German, okay? So his descent was French, and probably his mother tongue was also French. But Patterson says the inhabitants of Montblair were etymologically more German than French, having been excised by the latter only a little over half a century before their immigration. It refers to my families in general, not specific to Vincent. Okay. But watch this. They spoke corrupt dialect of French with a German intonation. From their sufferings, where is it? Okay. From their sufferings which they had endured for the religion after their annexation to France, they had a strong apathy to the French and Romanists, which has continued along the descendants to this day. In fact, they do not wish to be called French, but speaking of themselves as Swiss. But Byzantines thought for generations they thought it was French. And they still say it's French. I have the corrupt dialect, right? Questão do Poinai. E a Katoto Heshla Kinsela, Kurisimukuripurikamui. I'm constantly connected with the ancestors. And that's what I said before. You know, the spirits are getting pissed off about all this because they were all family at once. They knew they were family. But you had the separation where Acadians and Indians sided with Edward Cornwallis, and Canadians and Acadians and Indigenous and all that. They sided with my great granddaddy. That's where you got the Indian War. But people you won't get that. Where do they say most of the Rh negative blood factor comes from? From Europe, from Europe and Africa, right? And Europe and Africa were connected to Nova Scotia. So if they were connected to Nova Scotia, was Nova Scotia part of Europe? Or was Nova Scotia and Canada all together? What you perceive to be called Turtle Island. Are you catching it yet? Not being rude, or did just go whoosh, right above it? You see from what he had a religious seal, matched his business acumen. Says about his father dying. He was a year and 6 months. He had no schooling and remained illiterate all his life. Yet the land transactions in his name, all properly drawn up, witnessed and signed with his ex, far outcome those of any man in the settlement and make up a large part of book so and so of the land records kept. He also ran a lumber mill, a grist mill, farmed, and engaged in shipbuilding. Hey, great granddad, you change your name to Davy Irving? Who was your son? And that's why that's what I said. Like, All this is his deeds, the transactions. They killed him and took his life. They killed him because he basically took the place. You know, do I think my sixth grade granddaddy was a buffalo? Well, you know, the grumpy old man did attach himself to me from the time I was born to the age of 2. I had a medium tell me that because, you know, she's seen it, and then my mom told me everything was going to be okay. He's like, you're up against the fucker, right? It's like, here, jackass, get over your shit like you tell everyone else to. But, you know, hey, I did this. I delved deep into it as much crying and screaming and, you know, wanting to throw things and just, you know. That's what I'm saying. Like, you know, so to the young woman that come on and said with regards to like learning our languages, English, Portuguese, what have you, we didn't they didn't take your language from European settlers did, because they spoke different dialect too. So they were treated just as poorly as you, even before they came over here, because their land was taken from them. So please excuse me if I have no tolerance for this bullshit anymore. And I do say bullshit because you won't take the time to find out the truth because it's been programmed into you over lifetimes and lifetimes for at least probably 6, 7 generations. You know, they keep saying about the 7th generation. What did the 7th generation try telling them? What was going to happen in the 7th generation? Why was the 7th generation so important? Ano ito? Yes, to kulit yes yun. Parang smart yun. It's like the chief said it. It like so. How can you then say that it's sacred to the people and that the earth does not belong to man? Man belongs to the earth. But he's saying that part where, you know, you're laying claim to something that you just said that nobody owned. It's sacred to your people. It's sacred, and I understand that it's sacred to all people. And people say, oh, well, the white man just tears it up. Are you sure about that? Because like I said, you know, you'll say about the settlers and taking everything and colonizing everything, but I see you people living in the houses, in the car, like driving the fancy cars, wearing the gold, the jewels, the everyday clothes. Like, you know, you didn't have to stop doing that. So the best way to start learning it, or like bringing it back to you, because it's in your memory, it's in your DNA, but you're too busy fucking fighting with one another and saying you took it from us. You can't take something away. You can only suppress it. Yes, that's what I know what the camera could do. So he says the earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. I just caught that with regards to the mother. You say the mother earth, right? And man was born of the mother. You're your mother's child. You will always be your mother's child. That's how, when you respect the feminine, that's when you will begin to respect the man. But you can still have things and still respect the man. So that's the part where one wants to go to sublime to the ridiculous. And there's people that believe in taking medication, and then there's people that believe in herbal and natural. So, hey, it was like that. People got to choose. Now they've demonized it. And part of the colonization was due to the biblical text. But people won't believe that, right? And were there many white people in the biblical text? So, I guess the brown people were fighting amongst each other. Right? Just like I said before, that, you know, in Nova Scotia, the British will fight, like you'll fight with your brother and sister. And see, the natives even do it to each other. Where I live, it's told, don't show up on a reserve. Well, why should people fear showing up on a reserve if they're not of native culture? What did you do? You fucking taught them to hate. And it wasn't white men who taught them to hate. It was your own people. But that would be too much common sense for the leaders that say common sense, but yet they don't teach you, allow you to have common sense because hey, they're too busy keeping you fighting with one another and keep on saying, let's do truth and reconciliation when nobody wants to fucking answer to the truth. I'll be honest, I've seen more racist Indians than I have white people. And that's coming from somebody who comes from an Indian culture. If you don't believe me on that, well, that's too fucking bad for you. Grisito moka, gente. So every time I see this stuff coming up about white people, white people, stop blaming the white people and take responsibility for your own fucking color. No, I don't know this racist person. Okay, because I got the Torah. It came to me today, and I got to reorder the Quran because I didn't get the Quran. I didn't get the right book when I ordered the Quran. I'm going to use my own discernment because I see that with everything, and everyone has to blame for everything. But here, what is the música muslete música que gente com goião ai tocou. God gave you a brain. And my question is, why aren't you fucking using it? Oh, we only use 10% of our brain. I wonder fucking why. I wonder why. Eh? Dicendo por ecam, dico tu por isso, e se tu por é, ou não se tu por que é. Putting it, please tell me how. I'm going to ask you this. How is it? Because like people will say white people privilege, because this is what that young girl said about white people privilege, and we took your language from you and made you speak out. Which is not true because we didn't speak English to begin with either. So when you say about white privilege, okay, let me see. Retributions, and then, the Indians are saying about their treaties and what have you. They say nobody owns the land, but yet you say, oh, you can't be on that riverbank because you can't fish in these waters because they're our waters. He's contradicting the culture if he's saying you guys are like doing something different. So which Indians are you? Are you the ones that work for Edward Cornwallis, or are you the ones that work for the real people? For the people who weren't trying to colonize, but were trying to integrate the knowledge with one another. It's called evolution. But like I said, you'll go and you'll wear your jewelry and all that, hey, started with trading, right? Am I mocking you? Fuck no. I did my own genealogy, and in my grandfather's side, like I said before, my second great Grammy, she was a Levi, the Levi tribes, the Jewish tribe, because the majority of her ancestors, my great grandfathers before that, right up to the 11th one, the majority of them were rabbis. So you're fighting your own family over whatever, right? You can't even tell anymore because you're told that they're your enemy. And the ones telling you that are the ones in money. You have these women said to be the richest people in the world, right? And the majority of them are of the black culture, right? How could really many of them be from the white if the white didn't show up until, what they say, women said in the 1600s? But, it was here before that, but have a look at Michael Jackson, right? He's a black man. What did he do? He went and got pigmentation stuff, right? To change his color. Do you think it's possible that happened? Some people do bleach. People get sex changes. So everything's fucking deceiving. And who was it? Jordan Peterson. He did a video. I was watching all the videos he had done. He's like kind of crying some too because he's saying the truth is the way. And he's not wrong. And people were mocking him. Oh, what's he always crying for? Because he has a heart, something you might want to find. So, people don't like me or dislike me, but that's the part of it. Too fucking stubborn to say because it might make a little sense and you might get some clarity and actually come to the truth. course, you're just talking about it. It's like, well, it doesn't matter, but you don't care if the other race is, exterminated. You know, it's not all color that it be traffic, but you say it is, right? And you say it's the white people. I think it's all of you. Doesn't matter what color you are. But, some will just keep saying. So, when you say Black Lives Matter, well, okay, why isn't it all lives matter? Oh, right, because to you, it's actually not all lives matter as long as survival. Do I agree with this immigration stuff going on? No, I don't. I believe that things are happening too fast, and the means of the building process, it's not there. The infrastructure of it is all fucking ass backwards. You're saying about what happened now, what's happening now with immigration. These are the people that came over and called me Wallace. Okay? I don't know how fucking money they were. Oh, shit. I'm certain. Okay. So these are the names, but see, keep in mind that when they immigrated, okay, from starting in 1749, Cornwallis and before when they landed and when they got on the ship, see, they didn't put the women's names or the children's names, the girls' names or what have you. They children's names. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. The ones with under the age of 18, they weren't put on the list. Okay. So you think of in 1749, Edward Cornwallis was convicted, and then he brought the European settlers. Okay. First left them on George's Island for okay, to build the tunnels. What would they be using tunnels for? Trafficking, right? But they'll say, oh, that didn't happen. Now, you look at there, then, say from 1749 to 1752, right? The amount of immigration that happened there, okay? People disappeared. People disappeared then, and people would say, "Oh, well, they must have went back home or what have you." But who usually goes back home without know? Okay, so we were going missing too. Being thrown overboard on the way over because that's what happened to my eighth great Grammy and great granddaddy on my seventh great Grammy side. I read it in there, but hey, I said I use my own life experiences, but by using my own life experiences, that's how I come to the truth because I dig where most people won't go digging. You only see mostly historians or people who actually know about their family history. Some people are trying to sort the shit out, while others are just saying, "Oh, well, boy, nothing's going to change." No, because of that mindset, nothing will change for you. But the ones that do want change, you're not going to fucking hold them back because hey, it's that part of sitting down with one another. The hardest thing is to have that conversation because you may have to take accountability, especially in this stuff. You're looking at immigration. Well, people didn't ship that off. They went missing. And then now, okay, what are you bitching about? What are you fighting about? They say that, oh well, you're saying that they come over here and taking all our jobs. I understand your frustration with regards to the government subsidizing student subsidies. Most places, even in McDonald's and stuff like that, they would hire a student before they would hire someone that wasn't a student because they could pay cheaper fees. So when everybody immigrated, well, the Indians, as you say, they could say, you come in here and took our jobs, but instead we didn't take jobs, brought jobs. But then some wanted to roughshod over their ways, which, they had really good teachings, but each part did. We're the Masons, but you demonize them. There are ones that, misused Okay, so there was immigration, mass immigration. So we have mass immigration. Okay, so when they come over them, what did they do? They put about the Indian Patrol, right? Okay, so the Indian Patrol got much like ICE, right? Do you see what I'm getting at? I know something's got to click there. And if it doesn't, well, I don't know what to tell you because, I guess your ego's just getting in the way and won't allow you to see truth because you've been under so much hypnosis, which is half truth, half lies. So that was the 7 Years' War. That's what started it. And this here, the judge in the town's got bloodstains on his hands because they even, went into some of the British aspect of it. Edward Cornwallis's people. And the judge who convicted them was Edward Cornwallis. He was the one that actually sentenced them to death by hanging, which, it's really strange because they say, like, with the lunar group, when you go on the tour, they say that they were hung in the center of Lunenburg on a hill somewhere. They went to the thing. I forget where it was, but I can go back and find it because it's right around the church that my seventh great granddaddy helped build. And I believe, foul play happened in that church because when I went in the church and I went upstairs, I walked out on the petition where, it hovers over and you get to the balcony look over. But when I started 7 foot on there, holy crap, man, my body wasn't liking it. And then all of a sudden, it was like I felt somebody pick someone up and pop them over the side. So, like I said, please excuse me if I don't have self pity, if I don't have the pity for what's going on, because I'm taking the time to see, hey, because when I went in that church, my great granddaddy spoke German, my sixth great granddaddy, he spoke German. And it was like the Germans were running it, they were keeping in German. And when I went in there, I spoke it like I said who my granddaddy was. Oh man, I got snubbed. It's like, hey, seriously? What? Because you're white? I, I'm like, hey, more so that if you want to get to high school, that annoying, eh? Didn't like that, but that's just fine with me. So, I went to the Truth and Reconciliation 2 years ago, and I could see the energy, and I could see how people were looking at white girl can't be Indian. Sorry, but I'm just saying. My hair color my natural hair color is a strawberry blonde. everybody was marrying into one another. How the fuck do you think you got like the different shades of brown? Not being rude. So who is it that's ganging up on who? Because if white people are the minority and brown people, black people, I should say, are of the majority, then who's picking on who? It's easier to blame the oddball, right? Because the white people would be considered the odd man out. They can't blend in, right? So in North America, no, it wasn't the European settlers who colonized you. They built the buildings, but it was the British who colonized you. And okay, and English. Okay, so hold on. First, I got to figure out what I'm doing here. Okay, so I asked what culture brought about the first speaking English. The first people to break English were the Anglo Saxons, a culture group formed by Germanic tribes who merged to Britain from the North Sea coast, modern day northwest Germany, southern Denmark, and the Netherlands in the 5th and 6th century AD. The main groups were the Anglo-Saxons and the Jutes. J-U-T-E-S. The name English derived from Inglix, specifically come from the Angles, and came from a region known as Aegilia in what is now Hosting. So it was where did Hitler come from? No offense, like I know, like I'm not saying, but what has been happening? know. I'm just sitting with that because I can feel that. I don't have to be a history teacher. And then people say, well, you teach them greater culture. I'm teaching them what, you know, am I? No, I'm not. But they will want you to believe I am because it goes against much of what they're teaching. So, with regards to the immigrants coming over and why people saying they're taking their jobs, well, it's not just the white people saying about it, okay? But you're blaming the immigrants for what your government is doing. Why is that? Seriously, why is that? You're telling them, go the fuck in where you came from. Or you're illegal here, but you don't mind going on vacation where they live, right? I'm not in here to debate with people or fight with people or anything like that. I'm asking you, do your own research and go beyond what you've been taught. Go further. Go actually look. And I can feel that anxiousness. I'm sorry, I don't do pole roasting right now because I know nothing about it. I don't really know how it works or anything. I can see where people are so angry with everything and the different parts of our story, but it's much like the Bible. You can't just pick pieces out of it and don't realize that it is much bigger than what you can comprehend because, think of the life that some people live. You think it's just that narrow part of those few people? So you're sitting in class and you're drilling all this stuff in your head, and kids are thinking, I'm on stolen land, I'm on stolen land. Well, according to that chief settler, you're not on stolen land. No one's on stolen land. But did they come in and steal? They came in and there was an agreement before they came, right? 1749, 1752, and 1760, 61 treaties. There was a treaty in 1726, the contact colonial periods. Okay, so, you know, I'm going to say it because, you say you own the land, you own the waters and stuff like that, but, the chief is saying you don't own anything. And see, the thing is, you say about privilege. Do you know what the biggest privilege to have is? The biggest privilege to have is to free taxes, no taxes, and being able to hunt and fish whenever they want without somebody having to go do it for them. So let's say free food, no limitation on your free food. which is the biggest necessity for survival, correct? So you get free food, don't pay taxes, but you believe that's fair because you say, and they still give you money, which, billions of dollars each year goes into the indigenous communities. What your chiefs or governance does with it, it's them you need to go after, not your neighbor. It's like seriously, but you won't. Why won't you do that? Because your own people were doing it to you. What do you think the Indian patrol will hit? You look around. You say about the people in your security in different places like that. No offense, no offense to culture. Don't take no offense to it. But you're seeing more and more of the indigenous Indians being the security, right? So where's the Indian patrol for the Indian patrol? Oh, right. You're supposed to be like, okay, I know that sounded like just weird. Okay. You say about governments, okay, you get president, like, you don't pay taxes, and, you get free food whenever you want it. Yeah, especially like, if you have fish or what have you, there's no limitation. I don't really know what you do, right? But for everybody else, they're allowed one or two deer, a few rabbits, and a few fish a year, right? But you get all you can eat, and then you get to sell what other people shouldn't have to be buying if it was also food to them. This is what they put you in the mindset of. And like I said, people are going to get irritated with me for that, but it's common sense. You say, like, you have a chief that says you don't own the land. So how is there a treaty that says who gets to fish? How is there have to be a license to fish or hunt? Oh, right, because that's profitable to your governance. And it benefits nobody else but the ones that, you have your treaties. And it's not just natives that have treaties, it's every country that have treaties with one another. Maybe they just call it something else. So, I can understand both sides, and I can understand because it's not just the white culture that's, frustrated, sometimes frustrated with this. They have others ask the same question, and they should, because it's being a hypocrite. You're saying nobody owns the land, but okay, so nobody else is allowed to own the land like you, right? Does anyone have a right to put people on a reserve? No. So I can see where people would get frustrated with the fact that Indians are allowed to hunt and fish anytime they want. They're even allowed to scrape the bottom of the ocean if they want. but somehow everything's being blamed on white people. I'm just saying. Okay. France and Britain. Okay, so 7 Years' War was fought in 1756 to 1763, the first war to span the globe. It was chiefly fought between the alliance of Britain, Prussia, and Hanover against an alliance of France, Austria, Sweden, Saxony, Russia, and Spain. So you look for those places, okay, and France, Austria, Sweden, Saxony, Russia, and Spain. None of them could really speak English, correct? And those were the families of the immigrants, the ones that you say stole your land. France and Britain were especially hostile enemies. I wonder why. Because Edward Cornwallis scalped my seventh great granddaddy in front of his pregnant wife and 6 year old child and whoever else like was there because he was trying to protect those three youth. But would you get that? Fuck no, right? Because that's kind of the opposite of what you were taught, huh? So that's what really started the beef. And that's what started the war. But they don't teach you that in your history books, do they? They keep it covered up. Yeah, no? Yes, okay, sure. Britain hoped to destroy France's navy and merchant fleet, take possession of its colonies, and remove France as a critical rival. I love the European culture. My ex-husband's like British. Some of my favorite book are the like towards the British, some of the French. This is why I look into it. So if you're watching the ones that say like, "Oh, you look into that," like, this is why I look into it because it has to do with what's happening in the present. But people won't. You won't go look at that part because you're taught something different. So hey, they'll figure. Let's just tease you. You're not going to look into it because it takes effort. It takes the awareness of being able to look at it and see how it pertains to your life and the life around you and the time period it's supposed to be. Much of the fighting took place in North America, where the European powers clashed over possession of their colonies. So, you know, you scalped their leader. It was an attempted assassination, but it failed. So they had to take him and torture him. You could say I look psychotic there. Well, hey, which spirit was it? Because it's the one that's connected to me. And I believe he's that grumpy old man. He'd be yours fifth, sixth, seventh. Like I said, great granddaddy, depending on how old he was. I don't know if I ever met anyone one of my family members from his first wife. Oh, that got emotional. Shit. I think my great granddaddy had children with twins, or they looked an awful lot alike. So when you look, last time I did anything like this, like I really got angry because I was watching a film of the horse. It's another way to make money, and you're laundering it together. See, I know people don't like what I have to say. You're irritated and probably shut your ears down. That's not true. But it wasn't us who kept the alcoholics or told you to alcoholics. If anyone's to blame, wouldn't you think it would be the crown? But according to the native chief, you cannot own land. You can't steal something that belongs to another. Ekstrasyon. Nikogo möchtest du? So So there is really, it's almost like we're told that we're supposed to have nothing, and we fight for what we have, and it doesn't matter what you look like. You know, with the indigenous community, like you teach about pride and sharing, you know, but you're fighting for keeping from sharing, and you're claiming it as your own, but you're saying that I see white privilege, I see black privilege, I see Indian privilege, indigenous privilege, African American privilege, Caucasian privilege. It doesn't matter. I see the privilege. I see privilege in everyone because everyone is fighting to be seen, but no one wants to listen. Because first off, it would hurt too much to look at your own people's side. Like I said earlier. So when you see my body react, like that's the spirit speaking. It fucking hurts, and you gotta contain it. It's like, it's not that, hey. It's not a psychosis, schizophrenia, psychopathic, or anything like that. It's something beyond your own comprehension. And that's why you demonize it. Because it doesn't look natural. I didn't come here to be natural. It's like if I ever actually got a fist fight, I'd probably get the shit kicked out of me. But hey, you never know, because if spirit took over, well then hey, I'd still be aware about spirit being controlled. I actually had visions where my ex-husband and I were fighting. I don't know if it was a male or what, but it was like I was seeing that moment happen, and it was like I threw him through the wall. And the day that, like, just a few days before Christmas, when I was coming in over an overpass, and there was two men fighting in the roadway. And some man, I don't know if he was trying to get, like, he just wasn't making any effort. And my ex-husband told me to pull over. He told me to stay in the car. Well, he only got out and stood by the thing. He didn't do anything. So I'm sitting there like, no, I'm done with this bullshit. And I got out of the car, and I could have got my shit kicked, but I got out of the car, and boom, that's when spirit took over. And spirit spoke through me, and you could feel the energy coming with it, and they stopped just like that. And then they get up, and then they started telling me what they were fighting over. And I told them, I don't care. Just, and then when one of the guys wanted to hug me, I was like, nope. And then the other one, he was like, it was like he was trying to instigate with me. It's like, yeah, like basically, you better back off a little while, because he was a littler guy, but he was like coming up like, stuff like that. It's like, no, it wasn't me who did it. It was like that part of spirit that just went boom, right out. So welcome to the. No, it's not really the Truman Show, because I mostly don't go nowhere, so there's no excitement there. It's just when I come on here, there's starts. So hey, they think I don't know how I look. myself in 2 cameras and I experience it. So okay, what is it? He said, yeah. France retained fishing rights in Newfoundland and the Gulf of Lawrence. And acquires small Gulf islands here as the important fishing station. Britain also agreed to grant independence as well as a French trading. So they did the same thing. The Indians are saying, but they did the same thing to the Acadians, gave them a certain parcel of land. So it's petitioning off and saying, this is like, we're going to separate you instead of allowing the people to integrate together. They parceled them off. So that was Edward Cornwallis' people, just so you know. But for some reason, you're still blaming the European settlers. And, for a better security for liberty and it's the subject for provisions of influence beyond the seas. Here is pretty toys. Sheriffs for the first of the Gold Coast subject. He had been committed of for criminal matters in making returns to Pepper Corpus, to them directed by Frederick O. and Elise of the Pepper Corpus. Known as the subject be he be and be on. I just U.S. Bill of Rights, 1791. Why did I first type amendments with commentary? Bill of Rights. First 10 amendments were proposed by Congress in 1789 at their first session and having received the revision of the legislations of the three-fourths of several states, they became part of the Constitution of December 1791, and they are the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law representing an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abiding the freedom of speech, of the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress Redis and grievances. Petition the government for redis and grievance. Have you petitioned yet? I mean, in writing the petition. Probably. I mean, I'm not saying you're still, but for the grievances. That was like when my seventh grade granddaddy petitioned to get them off the godforsaken island of George's Island. Amendment 2, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. No sol- okay. Amendment 3, no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be dictated, prescribed by law. What the hell? The right of the people to be secure in their persons, house, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. No warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, support by oath or affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Okay, so mostly people know about that one. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a imprisonment or indictment of the grand jury, except in cases arising in the land, naval forces, or when the actual service in the war of danger or shall any person be subject for the same offense, which would be okay. Let's see what more I wish I would have done. Where did this? First Amendment, religious freedom and freedom to speak, print, assemble, and petition. A very good deal. That's weird. That's all. How did that get in there? that's a 7-minute word. I can't get. I'll have to find it. It's something that's weird. That's really freaking weird. 1726 treaty Great Britain's interest in trade lay at the foundation of the series of treaties negotiated with the Mi'kmaq and Lusat and Passamaquoddy. After 1713, treaties were mainly concerned with one thing: to establish a durable alliance between the British and the region's Aboriginal communities. So this was the British. So how could it be the European settlers? We were the builders. We weren't the fucking ones who. They say like the treaties were mainly concerned with one thing: to establish a durable alliance between the British and the region's Aboriginal communities. In this context, the British were concerned with each community's relationship with the French crown. Divide. That alliance through the British undermined their own efforts to establish some form of control over the region. To that end, the treaties created a series of laws which were designed to normalize relationships between the British and the region's three Aboriginal societies. The first of the treaties was signed in 1726, formally bringing to an end a 3-year-long war between New England and Wabanaki. The Wabanaki was a political alliance of the major Aboriginal communities living in the Atlantic region. The alliance was composed of 4 societies: the Mi'kmaq, the Nias, and the Passamaquoddy, and a loosely allied group of communities living between the Pennacook and Nebec rivers. This aligned group is often called the Abenaki. Abenaki. That sounds awfully close to the Anunnaki. What? Because the only one. The war, which had begun in 1722, was mainly sparked by Mi'kmaq, Militis, and Abenaki concerns regarding the New England colonials' northward expansion. The New England fishermen had pushed north aggressively into Nova Scotia coastal waters that had been chewed before 1713. So there's the British. So I'll ask you again, why are you blaming the European settlers? For the Mi'kmaq, the fishermen's aggressive actions sparked concerns about possible interference in the fishery. Okay, the chief has said we are part of the land. So how could they even? I'm questioning how could they even do that? Just say because the more weapons and the aggressiveness. And like I said, with all due respect, the Indians were going around and scalping people and putting on a stick and riding through town doing their loud noises because they got their catch. So, like I said, they're all barbaric, no matter what culture you're looking at or race. You got that theory of the survival of the fittest. So it's like divide and conquer, right? Instead of, helping each other to be fit. We're at aggressive actions start concerns possible interference in fishery. As well, the Abenaki were upset with attempts by New Zealand land companies to alternate lands at the mouth of the Ginnibic River, which is a major river flowing into the Gulf of Maine in the southwest Maine. Like that guy said, how can you own the water? But you're claiming, right? Even no fly zones, you're saying you claim that airspace. What? Like, what? Do people realize how ridiculous that sounds? So if you're in a place with most water, then you're good with that. And, you know, instead of realizing that everything was, hey, that's just common sense. Everybody wants to go by common sense, but they want to say about truth and reconciliation, but they don't want to see how ridiculous it sounds. Like it's okay to go hunting and fishing and get your food for free, but everybody else had to go to the grocery store and pay for it. Who's making the profit there? Because that sounds like the wrong type of profit. These two concerns about the expansion of English interests also underlie Mi'kmaq and Mi'kmaq motivations in negotiating a treaty with the British in 1726. There's the British, right? But wait a minute, you know, the Germanic were the first speaking, right? The Anglo Saxon, they were the first English speaking group of people that went to Britain. You know, I'm going to say, okay, the British looked up to Rome, and Hitler looked up to Rome and Britain. And, I'm saying it is so very much the same. Like, with the immigration, people are getting angry because they're giving money to immigrants, and Canadians are saying, "Hey, we got no money. Where's ours? They're taking our money." And I can see where you're irate with that because it's not fair. It's not right. It's not just. But why are you going after the immigrants for it and saying you're not good here? You're illegal. Go home, or you're going to pick them up and you're going to aggressively remove them because they don't have papers. But yet, every one of those ones you say are illegal that don't have papers, they're paying income tax. So how does that work? Because isn't income tax like Canadian citizenship, right? You need a SIN number to have a job. You need a social security number to fill out your taxes. So, hey, so please tell me, how are they illegal if you're paying taxes just because they don't have that piece of paper? But people won't see how where what I'm saying makes sense. Instead of fighting against one another and saying you can't get anything done, well, stop fighting with one another and you might. You could have a beautiful country. You had the people that know how to plant things and not stealing it from everybody, but teaching people how to do it. I did a past life, uh, past life regression thing last night in kind of in hypnotherapy, but I didn't get hypnotized right under. I was like, I knew what I was doing. It was just kind of helping me. But when she was doing it, the first time she was doing it, my heart started racing some. It was like I was picking up on somebody's anxiety because it was almost like you were trying to go to the past. But then when we went further and she was doing it, I got that sensation of a deja vu. And I mean, I was like going like that with the deja vu. Like, wait a minute, this feels like it happened before. Just the whole like bit of it. And then it was like finding your spirit guides and talking with your spirit guide. And I ended up getting a spirit, uh, it came to me academia. So when I looked at academia, it was like a lot of like teachings, regular, not of your regular, not of your regular education system, but for warriors and teaching just the different. So, bellissimo, guys. So this is how like spirit takes me back and forth, and seeing like things into the future, experiencing things of a sort of a future people or what have you, or it's just like holy shit, slow down now. I mean, where are we going now? What's going on? Okay, okay. Okay, academia is an ancient civilization frequency operated as an exclusive, informal elite system designed growing, to train governing, priestly, or warrior classes rather than to provide general education. While some formal schools exist for scribes and elites, much of the higher level intellectual training occurred through intimate mediumship, mentorship, divine gatherings, and an apprentice like system. The reinforced social hierarchies. So it was like of Play-Doh, things like that. So that's where it took me. So that was telling me, like in past lives or what have you, this is the information that I can tap into. I can, like, so it's not just, it's the remembrance. So, and then she had us do another part to it where, we were going to the future. That we could choose between what, 200, 500, or 1,000 years into the future. And I chose 1,000 years. So when it was going there and what have you, I ended up, she said, like when you get to the door and you open it, there's going to be like fog there. But when I opened it, there was no fog. So if where I was, there was no fog, then it meant that I went beyond the fog, because it was like I was walking through this door, but it was like I was in the air and I was looking out, and it was all lush with trees, and there was a stone castle, and then there was like just little some other things around there and what have you. And it was green. So hey, really, I should have been for this year. I bring forward my visions. I bring forward what spirit asked me to bring forward. And I have a picture of my people here who just he stood there. He sat there and he posed for it. People say, "Oh, you just cut him up in the tree." No, he was going to fall. And I asked him, like, not to get his picture. I have other nice pictures that should develop. Some nice rings or something. So, that's where people really need to find out the real. Go past your education, because that's just a bunch of bullshit. It teaches you what it wants you to hear, and then messes it all up and intertwines it together and things other people. But that's the part that, we need to stop blaming others and, look, take accountability for our own actions or our own ancestors' actions. But that's the part, we don't want to look, like I said, we don't want to look at our own side. White people don't want to look at their own shit. Black people don't want to look at their own shit. Brown people don't want to look at their own shit. I don't care what culture, religion, or anything like that, color you are. It's not part of, looking at your own shit. Because, you're not goody goody. And if you say that the white people are the minority, and the people of color are the majority, then who's got the privilege? Who's ganging up on who? So, I really don't give a shit what people think of me. I see the truth for what it is. Others just want to remain in denial of it because you don't want to look further. You don't want to see what's
on the surface because, it makes you a victim. So, hope you all have a great day. Tomorrow's the third weekend. And with that being said, I'm sending you a spotlight. What's your people for greatness? What yourself? Sure, back to yourself. Others, and your strength. You know, you are somebody said you are have to be. And hey, step outside of that little limited box system and really see the truth of what it is that you. Because as long as you keep playing victim and not looking at your own shit, that person that says nothing's going to change with them, right? And that's what I say with because change does come. True. It does.